Ladies and gentlemen, I got to play 3 hours of Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. Now, usually, when I play a DLC and I'm 3 hours in, I think to myself, wow, I feel like I've seen a good chunk of this DLC. Or wow, it feels like I'm already like halfway through or almost done with it. But when you play an Elden Ring DLC, 3 hours just feels like you've seen nothing, like you're scratching the surface of what this has to offer. And yeah, it was a really good time. I got invited to this preview event where media got to check out 3 hours of the game. I could not capture my own footage, but I was provided B-roll that I could use to talk about my experience. And it all comes down to this. If you want more Elden Ring, you're gonna get more Elden Ring. So as many of you might expect, the DLC is in fact accessed through Miquella's cocoon. You get a prompt, and then you fade into the realm of shadows. And immediately there's this breathtaking vista. You're sort of in this field of graves that are almost like phasing between life and death or something. They're like spectral graves. There's a giant Erdtree in the background, and there's already, plenty of stuff in the distance where it feels like they could be points of interest. There's also this towering fire monster. Basically, it looks like a giant torch with arms and legs. I try to engage with it. That didn't go particularly well, and I figured it wasn't worth spending my valuable 3 hours trying to kill this guy, so I decided to move onwards. And the game does a good job of sort of guiding you towards the main objective. So on top of the sites of grace, you've got what are called Miquella's footprints. They're very distinct sort of pillars of lights that are a specific symbol that when you look at, you'll know sort of this is the mainline path that you're headed in. But outside of that, the world is yours to explore and for you to discover. In this one area of this DLC, there are two major dungeons, one sort of more towards the left, the Ballarat Tower Settlement, and then towards the right, there's Castle Ensis. So I actually managed to finish the dungeon to the left, the Ballarat Tower Settlement. I did a little bit of Castle Ensis, but couldn't finish that on time. So I'll kind of give you a rundown of what that was like. I didn't get to explore the open world as much. I essentially focused more on dungeon delving and getting to at least one of the major bosses. So, Ballarat Tower Settlement, it's this ravaged town area that eventually leads into and ascends towards a palace-like building. And there are a lot of like these cool spectral enemies, almost like townsfolks that have been turned into these dark ghost-like entities. And there are also these gargoyles along the way. And as a combination of these enemies that get in your way, you have to be very careful and, watch out for corners. And if you keep a keen eye on the environment, you can find branches along the main path where you can essentially engage in exploration. A lot of rooftops where you could hop onto to essentially find some items and some optional loot. And yeah, this is just like a nice little introductory dungeon to introduce us to this new setting. The boss at the end, though, I've got to say, man, the Divine Beast Dancing Lion, he's called. You got to see a little bit of him in the trailers. Having fought this guy, I've got to say, this is one of the coolest bosses in any FromSoft game. This is just a glimpse of what you can expect from this boss. Really, really cool what they did with him. And if this is a taste of what bosses will be like in this DLC, I'm telling you, we're in for a treat. Apparently, there are more than 10 major bosses, and I assume there are also, mini bosses scattered around as well. If this is the kind of spectacle we can expect in terms of boss battles and also difficulty, then I think FromSoft fans will be pleased. This boss was actually pretty difficult. For the purposes of this preview event, I did have to take the coward's path and summon some spirit ashes to help me so I could defeat this boss and move along and see more of what this game has to offer. But yeah, this one boss alone already got me excited for the bosses that I'll see in this game. Bosses are my favorite part of any FromSoft game, and this DLC made a magnificent first impression with the Divine Beast Dancing Lion. That's all I'll say about that. I don't think the bosses in this DLC will disappoint if what I've seen so far is anything to go by. So after I beat that dungeon, I decided to immediately go to the major dungeon towards the right, Castle Ensis. Definitely a more difficult area, and thematically more involving soldiers and knights, both in terms of enemy types and bosses that you'll see there. But yeah, I didn't get super far in, but already that area I was already excited to further explore and to look into all of its nooks and crannies. And yeah, before I knew it, time kind of flew by. 3 hours didn't feel like 3 hours at all. I was being told that I needed to put the controller down and I really didn't want to, and that's already a great sign. Now, it was interesting talking to other people who did focus more on exploration and hearing about all the different things that they discovered, which I found super exciting. Even looking at the B-roll, I'm like, oh wow, there's like a bunch of stuff here that I never got to encounter because I did focus more on dungeons. But if what I'm hearing from other players who focus more on exploration and looking at the B-roll, if this is indication of the kind of exploration we can expect in this DLC, then I imagine it's going to be a lot like the base game, where there's just going to be a lot of dungeons, new areas, open world bosses, NPCs, quests, events, secrets, you name it, to encounter that will encourage and reward exploration in a way that few games do. Elden Ring already did that. This DLC seems to just follow up on that. And I was also impressed by the fact that this one area of the map already felt pretty substantial, and I could see, like, looking at the map, that there were other map fragment icons sort of towards the corner that would allow me to unlock other areas of the map that basically told me this is just a fragment. This world is more expansive than what this preview event allowed us to explore. So I'm very curious to see what the overall map size and density of this world is. This one area alone already offered plenty of content, so I mean, I can only imagine that the DLC in its entirety will feel like a whole game within itself. Obviously, it won't be as big as the base game, but, you know, I imagine it's going to be at least, you know, a couple dozen hours to really see everything it has to offer. And what's really going to offer a lot of replay value is all of the new weapons that this DLC introduces. I got to try out this giant katana with a weapon art that is reminiscent of Sekiro's Ichimonji, where you just do a big sort of downward strike. You got the martial arts fists that were shown in the trailer. This one's definitely going to require a bit of skill to master. It's very close quarters, but the animations are super cool, and if you leverage it correctly, you can very quickly stun opponents. I tried out this new flaming greatsword that had a cool special ability where it just lit the greatsword on fire and dealt a good amount of damage. And maybe my personal favorite are the bear claws, which have a lot of forward momentum, and the attack speed and pattern are really ferocious, so it just felt really good to use. I'm very curious to try out a build with the bear claws in mind. But seeing all the new weapons, not only in the time that I had with the demo, but also in the B-roll, stuff that I didn't get to try out because of the limited time, all of them just feel so different and unique, and, you know, like, they all have their different play styles, and, like, you could do entire playthroughs with them, experimenting with them, and these new weapons just make Elden Ring exciting all over again, not just because of the new content that the DLC offers, but also because you can play the base game with all of these new weapons. A few other things to note about how Shadow of the Erdtree works. When it comes to, like, level scaling, Shadow of the Erdtree has its own leveling system of sorts, or its own power scaling system of sorts. So as you explore the realm of shadows, you'll find what are called Scadutree blessings, which are essentially items that allow you to go to a site of grace and use them and spend them to bolster your character's ability to deal and negate damage. And on top of that, you've got what are called Revered Spirit Ash blessings, which essentially bolster your summon spirits and steed abilities. And the game specifically tells you that the benefits you receive from the Scadutree and Revered Spirit Ash blessings are specific to and only work in the realm of shadows, which indicates that this is essentially how they plan to ensure that no matter what level you are, you still have to go through some kind of progression system that is tied specifically to this DLC. So that means that whether you're over-leveled or under-leveled, you're still going to have an adequate experience progressing through this expansion. But yeah, that's sort of the basic rundown of what I experienced in my 3 hours playing Shadow of the Erdtree. Again, it's just more Elden Ring, but content that really does feel substantially new, whether it's the new weapons or the, you know, new bosses, new dungeons, whatever. All of it just feels fresh, and like they really worked on making the stuff stand out from the content we've already seen in the base game. And this just already feels so expansive based on the fact that even having put 3 solid hours into this, it really felt like I've not done all that much. This DLC will have taken around 2 years to make, and it feels like it really shows that those 2 years were used effectively, and they really squeeze as much into this as possible. Though, of course, the final verdict I'll know for sure when I play the DLC in its entirety to see if everything I felt within the first 3 hours of this DLC will kind of stay throughout the course of the rest of what this DLC has to offer. I get the sense that the answer to that will be yes, but we'll know for sure when I play it in its entirety and I get a final review out for you guys when the time comes. But until then, I hope you enjoyed my preview and got something out of the information I have to offer based on the 3 hours I had with the DLC. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Shadow of the Erdtree, what you're looking forward to from it, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.